Eli Turner rode his horse slowly across the open plains, the warm evening sun resting on his shoulders like a calm hand. The sky stretched endlessly above him, soft orange turning into shades of purple as the day began to settle. The land felt peaceful, wide, and quiet. But inside Eli's mind, nothing was quiet. His thoughts moved like drifting clouds, never staying in one place for long. People often said he seemed distracted, and they were right. Even now, while holding the reins, his eyes kept wandering from the road ahead, to the hills far away, then to the clouds, and then back to the dust below his boots. He wasn't careless, he wasn't lazy. He just didn't know where his thoughts wanted to settle. As he rode through the soft wind, he found himself thinking about the same question he had been asking for years. What am I even looking for? He didn't have an answer. He only knew he had to keep going. His horse, Dusty, was patient with him. Dusty had learned long ago that Eli would sometimes slow down for no reason, or stop to stare at something that didn't really mean anything at all. Dusty would sigh and wait until Eli remembered he was riding. It happened so often that Eli sometimes laughed at himself and said, "You're smarter than me, Dusty." Dusty would flick his ears, as if agreeing. The closer Eli got to Redstone, the more signs of life he saw. Small farms, quiet fences, and old windmills that spun gently in the breeze. He wanted to focus on the road, but every sound and movement pulled at his attention. A bird flew past, and he almost followed it with his horse. A cloud looked like a shape he remembered from childhood, and he slowed down to stare at it. Even a small dust swirl made him stop for a few seconds. Anyone watching him would think he had all the time in the world, or that he didn't know where he was going. Eli finally reached the narrow path leading into Redstone. He leaned forward in the saddle, trying to concentrate. He told himself, "Just get into town, Eli, straight ahead, nothing else." But the town was busier than he expected. People walked in and out of stores, wagons rolled along the road, children played outside, and horses trotted in different directions. It all happened at once, and Eli couldn't keep his attention on just one thing. He looked toward a shop window where a man was placing hats on display. Then he looked toward a dog chasing its own tail. Then toward a man carrying a sack of grain, and while his eyes jumped around like this, he forgot to notice the wagon coming straight toward him from the side. Dusty stopped suddenly, saving both of them from trouble. The wagon driver loudly called out for him to watch where he was going. Eli quickly apologized with a nervous smile, though he didn't mean to cause any trouble. Once the wagon passed, he patted Dusty's neck and whispered, "Thanks." Again, he rode forward, but his cheeks were warm with embarrassment. It wasn't the first time he had nearly bumped into someone or something. Eli never meant to be in the way. He just couldn't help losing himself in a world of things happening around him. As he entered the center of town, he realized how tired he was. His shoulders slumped, and Dusty seemed to feel it too, slowing into a gentle walk. The saloon at the corner caught Eli's attention, not because he wanted a drink, but because he needed a place to sit and think for a moment. Sometimes, sitting helped him focus, even if only for a little while. He tied Dusty to the post outside and gave him a soft pat. "I won't be long," he said, though he wasn't sure if that was true. Dusty didn't seem worried. The horse lowered his head to rest. Inside the saloon, soft music played in the background. People talked quietly, some laughing, some sharing stories. Eli found a small table by the window. Away from the noise, he pulled out an old, worn map from his bag. The edges were torn, and the lines were fading, but it was the only link he had to a place he barely remembered. He stared at the map, trying to figure out the right direction. The lines made sense to most people, but to Eli they felt like tangled paths. He tried to focus on the words printed on the paper, but they seemed to shift every few seconds, because his mind kept drifting to other thoughts. His past, the journey, the people he met along the way, the stories he heard, the places he remembered only in small pieces. A few minutes passed, and he hadn't understood anything new. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. He wondered, not for the first time, if the problem was him. Maybe he just wasn't built to concentrate the way others could. Maybe his thoughts were meant to float, like dust in sunlight. Still, he didn't want to give up. He had been traveling for so long, trying to find the old Turner Ranch, his family's home, before life changed and everything became uncertain. He didn't remember much about it. He had lost his parents young, and most of what he knew came from stories told by the people who took him in. They loved him, but they didn't have all the answers. The ranch, the land, the memories, everything felt just out of reach. Like a dream he could almost touch. He looked outside the window. People walked by, each with their own purpose. He wondered if anyone else felt as confused as he did. Maybe everyone had moments like this. Maybe he just felt his moments more deeply. He stared at the map again, determined to understand it. But his eyes drifted to the road outside. A small bird hopped near the door, then flew away. Eli watched it disappear into the sky. Then he looked back at the map. Then he looked at the people near the counter. Then he looked at the ceiling, thinking about something completely different. He caught himself and shook his head. "Stay on one thing, Eli," he whispered. But he didn't stay on one thing. He couldn't. He tried to think about why. Why did his mind wander so easily? Why did he find it hard to stay focused even when something meant so much to him? He didn't think something was wrong with him. He just thought maybe he was built differently. Maybe he noticed too much at once. Maybe his heart and mind both had too many directions to look toward. He leaned back in his chair, the map resting on the table. For a moment, he closed his eyes and listened to the sounds around him. Laughter, footsteps, clinking glasses, soft music. Somehow, the mix of sounds made him feel less alone. Even if he didn't know exactly where he was going, he felt that maybe he was meant to be here right now. Maybe this town, this moment, this quiet corner, maybe it was part of the path. He opened his eyes and looked at the map again. "I'll find it," he said softly. Someday. Even if he didn't know where to start, he still believed that. Deep inside, he had a feeling that the journey would make sense eventually. He just needed time. Maybe guidance, maybe someone who understood the way he saw the world. For now, he let the gentle light from the window fall across the table. It warmed the map, the table, and his hands. He didn't feel as lost as he thought. He felt like he was waiting for something or someone who might help him see things more clearly. And little did he know, that moment was closer than he realized. Eli sat in the quiet corner of the saloon, the soft afternoon light touching the table where his old map lay unfolded. He tried to study it again, but his eyes kept drifting to the window, to the sound of footsteps outside, to conversations he wasn't part of. It was just how he was. His attention moved like wind blowing over grass, never resting in one place for too long. Still, he kept trying. He moved his finger along one of the faded lines on the map. It was supposed to lead somewhere important. Somewhere he had been searching for a long time. He leaned closer, but the words and shapes kept blurring, not because they were unclear, but because his mind wouldn't settle. As he tried once more to focus, a voice broke through the soft noise of the room. "Cowboy, are you always so distracted?" Eli lifted his head immediately. The voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to pull his attention faster than anything else had all day. A young woman stood near his table, her hands resting lightly on her hips. Her hat was tilted slightly, her boots dusty from walking outside, and her expression curious, not rude, not amused, just straightforward. She looked like someone who spoke her mind without hesitation. Eli blinked, surprised by her sudden appearance. "I guess sometimes," he replied quietly. "Sometimes?" she repeated with a raised brow. "You looked at that map for 10 seconds, then stared out the window for 20. Then you looked back, then, at the ceiling." Eli's cheeks warmed. He hadn't realized anyone was watching. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Well, I get distracted a little." "A little?" she said again, pulling out the chair across from him before he could stop her. She sat down, leaning slightly forward, studying him like he was a puzzle she wanted to solve. "Is that why you seem lost out here?" Her words weren't unkind, but they hit him straight in the chest. Most people didn't ask him questions like that. They just assumed things like he was careless or slow. But this girl, whoever she was, seemed to actually notice him. Eli tried to smile, though it came out unsure. Maybe. I've been traveling a long time. Hard to know exactly what I'm looking for sometimes. She studied him a moment longer, then nodded slightly. Name's Mara. He nodded back. Eli Turner. Mara glanced at the map on the table. You trying to find something? Or just pretending to read that old paper for fun? He let out a gentle laugh. It surprised him, because he didn't laugh easily in front of strangers. I'm trying to find my family's old ranch. Haven't been there since I was little. Mara's expression softened. Where's it supposed to be? That's the thing, Eli admitted. He tapped the map lightly. I can't make sense of this. I've been following it the best I can. But I still end up in the wrong places. Mara leaned closer, resting her elbows on the table. Well, for someone who gets distracted by everything from clouds to shadows, you picked a pretty challenging task. Eli looked at her nervously. You noticed the cloud thing? Everyone noticed, she said honestly. You nearly rode into a wagon because you were watching a bird. He covered his face with his hands for a moment. Oh no, Mara laughed softly. Not cruelly, just warmly. Relax. It happens. Besides, you've got that look. What look? Eli asked. The look of someone who sees too much at once, she said thoughtfully. Like your eyes open to everything around you. It's not a bad thing. Just makes life a little noisier. Eli lowered his hands and took in her words. No one had ever explained it like that. People usually just told him to pay attention, as if it were that simple. But Mara didn't sound annoyed. She sounded like she understood something most people didn't. You live here? He asked, trying to shift the conversation away from his embarrassment. Nearby ranch, she replied. Come into town often enough. I know most people here. You stand out though. Because I almost hit the wagon? Because you look like you're searching for something important, she corrected. Not many folks walk around with that kind of expression. Eli looked down at the map again, feeling a bit exposed by her accurate observation. I don't know if I'll ever find the ranch, he admitted. Everything on here looks different from what I remember. Mara stared at the map. Well, this thing's older than half the buildings in this town. Lines change, roads change, land shifts. Hard to follow something when the world moves on. Eli sighed gently. I thought maybe if I could find some clue, I'd feel less lost. Mara looked at him. Not with pity but with interest. Being lost isn't always bad, she said. Sometimes it means you're getting closer to something new. He looked up, surprised by her perspective. You really think so? Sure, she said, shrugging. But you won't find anything if you keep staring at the ceiling. He gave a small, embarrassed smile. Sorry, my mind just wanders. I noticed, she teased lightly. They sat quietly for a moment, but it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt like Mara was trying to understand him, and Eli appreciated the effort more than he could say. Finally, she picked up the corner of the map. So this ranch of yours, it meant something special? Eli nodded slowly. It was home. My parents kept it running before life changed. After I lost them, I got moved around a lot. I never stayed anywhere long. But I always remembered a few things. The smell of the morning fields. The fence line near a big oak tree. A creek behind the barn. Mara listened carefully, not interrupting him once. That ranch is the only place that felt like mine, he finished softly. And I've always wanted to see it again. She tapped the map thoughtfully. Then maybe you shouldn't search alone. Eli blinked in surprise. What do you mean? Mara sat back, crossing her arms. I know these lands better than most folks around. My father used to take me riding all over. I've seen old trails, forgotten markers, abandoned ranches. I could help you find the place. Eli stared at her, unsure whether to believe she meant it. You'd help a stranger like me? You don't feel like a stranger, she said honestly. Besides, you clearly need someone to keep you from staring at random birds. Eli laughed again, shaking his head. I guess I do. Mara leaned forward. So? You want someone to ride with you? Someone who won't let you drift off the path every 5 minutes? Eli thought about it. Traveling alone had become heavy, tiring, confusing. Maybe what he needed wasn't just a map or directions. Maybe he needed someone who understood the way his mind worked. Or at least, didn't mind it. Yeah, he said softly. I'd like that. A small smile touched Mara's lips. Good. We'll start tomorrow morning. Meet me outside the stable at sunrise. She stood up, smoothing the dust off her clothes. Before walking away, she glanced at him again. And Eli? Yeah? You're not as lost as you think, she said. You just need someone to point out the right road. With that, she turned and headed toward the door. Eli watched her go, thinking about her words long after she disappeared outside. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like the world was too big for him. He didn't feel like he was drifting with no direction. Someone had noticed him, really noticed him, and instead of judging him, they offered understanding. He folded his map carefully and slipped it into his bag. Then he leaned back in his chair, feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and warm. Tomorrow, he wouldn't ride alone. And maybe, just maybe, Mara's question had opened the door to the answers he had been searching for all these years. The next morning came with a soft golden light spreading across Redstone. The sky was clear, and the air felt cool enough to make Eli breathe a little deeper. He arrived at the stable just before sunrise, Dusty standing patiently beside him. Eli had barely slept. His mind had been full of thoughts about the journey ahead, about Mara, and about the strange feeling of finally not being alone. He checked the saddle straps again, even though he had already checked them twice. He wanted everything to be right. He didn't want to be the distracted cowboy Mara had seen yesterday, even though that was simply who he was. Still, he hoped he could at least try to be a little more focused today. Footsteps echoed behind him. He turned to find Mara walking toward him with her usual confident stride. She wore a light jacket, her hat tilted low to block the brightening sun. She carried herself like someone who knew exactly where she was going, even when she didn't. Eli admired that. Morning, Eli, she greeted. Morning, Mara, he replied, trying to sound more awake than he felt. She looked him over. You ready? I think so, she smiled. Well, that's better than yesterday, when you didn't even know what road you were standing on. Eli laughed quietly. He liked that she teased him in a gentle way. It made his nervousness feel lighter. They mounted their horses Mara on her brown mare named Willow and rode out of the town together. At first, the path was wide and easy. The sun grew warmer, lighting the fields and making the long grass shimmer. For a while, Eli kept his eyes on the road, determined not to look anywhere else. But the world around him was too full of things to notice. Birds flew in patterns overhead. The wind made the grass move like waves. A small group of deer stood near a stream. Eli's eyes drifted toward everything, except the direction they were going. Mara noticed, of course. Eli, she said casually. Left side is pretty. Right side is nice too. But straight ahead is the only place you need to look right now. Eli blinked and looked forward again. Sorry. Don't apologize. Just stay with me, she said softly. He nodded. They continued riding, and the land slowly changed. The fields turned into small hills, the ground becoming rougher. Mara led the way, explaining the places they passed. This used to be a trade trail, she said. My father brought me here when I was young. We would ride for hours, and he'd tell me stories about these lands. Eli listened carefully, grateful for her guidance. He tried to store each detail she shared in his mind, though it didn't stop his attention from slipping now and then. A few hours passed, and they reached a narrow canyon where the walls rose on both sides. The shade felt cool, and their horses walked slowly over the uneven rocks. "Be careful here," Mara warned. "The ground changes fast." Eli nodded again, but as they moved forward, he saw a small lizard sunbathing on a rock. His eyes followed its tiny movements, and he didn't notice Dusty stepping near a loose stone. The moment Dusty stumbled lightly, Eli snapped back to attention. Mara turned her head sharply. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," Eli said, embarrassed. "I just looked away for a second." "A lot can happen in a second out here," Mara reminded gently. "That's why you have to stay present. Try listening to the land instead of just watching it." Eli didn't fully understand what she meant, but he tried. He closed his eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. The sounds around him, wind, hooves, distant calls of birds, felt clearer somehow. When he opened his eyes again, he felt a little more steady. Mara noticed. "Good. See? You can focus if you want to." He smiled a bit. "It's not easy." "I know," she admitted. "But I've learned something: your mind doesn't wander for no reason. You see the world differently. Where others notice one thing, you notice 10. It's not a problem. You just need to guide it." Eli had never heard anyone describe his mind like that. For most of his life, people had told him to stop drifting or stop daydreaming. But Mara made it sound like a skill instead of a flaw. "Thanks," he said sincerely. "Don't thank me yet. We still have a long ride ahead," she replied. They followed the canyon until it opened into a wide valley. The grass was taller here, swaying gently in the breeze. The sky stretched far above, clear and open. Mara slowed Willow and pointed ahead. "We're heading toward those hills," she said. "Used to be several ranches out that way, some abandoned, some rebuilt. Do you think one of them might be mine?" Eli asked quietly. "Maybe," she said. "But we'll have to check each area. First, though, we need to follow the creek." They rode toward the sound of flowing water and found a thin creek winding through the valley. Mara explained that old ranches were often built near water sources. Eli followed the flowing line of water with his eyes, noticing how it reflected the sunlight. They rode beside the creek for a long time. Sometimes Eli drifted into memories: soft, small images from his childhood, a barn door swinging open, a wooden fence under his hand, his father's voice calling him. He couldn't remember the whole picture, but the small pieces made his heart feel heavy and warm at the same time. Mara noticed his silence but didn't interrupt it. She gave him space, letting him think. Eventually, she spoke. "You're remembering something, aren't you?" "A little," he said. "Just small things, like pieces of a puzzle." "That's good. Sometimes that's all you need to find the rest." They stopped to rest the horses under a tall tree. Mara shared water from her canteen with Eli, and they sat together on a fallen log. "You're doing well so far," she said. "You sure?" Eli asked doubtfully. "I feel like I keep losing focus." "You do," she admitted truthfully. "But you also keep trying. And that's what matters." Her encouragement made Eli feel lighter. He wasn't used to someone being patient with him. After their break, they continued onward. As they traveled deeper into the hills, the land became rougher. Old fences appeared here and there, some broken, some half covered by plants. Mara slowed down several times to look around. "These are signs we're getting close to old homesteads," she said. "Families lived here long ago. Some places were abandoned when people moved on." Eli felt nervous and hopeful at the same time. Every old fence made his heart beat faster. Every wooden post half buried in the earth made him wonder if it once belonged to his family. They found an old trail, almost hidden under the tall grass. Mara pointed to it. "This used to be a path used by ranchers moving cattle. See how the ground dips slightly in a straight line? That's from years of travel." Eli squinted and finally saw what she meant. He hadn't noticed it at first. His eyes had gone to the flowers and the shadows instead. "You're learning," Mara said with a small smile. He smiled back. "I'm trying." They followed the trail for a while until they reached a small ridge overlooking a wide plain. They stopped at the top, letting their horses rest. From there, Eli saw the remains of several structures far in the distance, shapes that might have been barns or houses long ago. Could be one of these, Mara said. Eli stared at the distant shapes. His chest tightened with hope. Do you think? We'll check each one, she said. No rush. We'll take our time. For the first time in his long, confusing journey, Eli felt like he was finally getting somewhere. Not just on the land, but inside himself. He wasn't wandering blindly anymore. He had direction. He had help. He had someone who understood his mind. The sun began to lower behind the hills, painting the sky with warm colors. Mara looked at him and said, We'll camp here tonight. Tomorrow, we start checking these places. Eli nodded, feeling both tired and excited. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone on the journey. He felt guided. He felt seen. And as he looked across the land that stretched endlessly before him, he felt something new growing inside his heart, something he hadn't felt since he was a small boy playing under the sun. A feeling that maybe his story was finally beginning to make sense. The next morning arrived gently, with the sun rising behind the hills and spreading soft light across the land. Eli woke up slowly, feeling the cool air on his face. He sat up and looked around. Mara was already awake, feeding Willow and Dusty. She worked calmly, humming a quiet tune as the horses chewed their morning food. The scene made Eli feel peaceful, more peaceful than he had felt in months. Morning, he said, stretching his arms. Mara looked over her shoulder and smiled. Morning, Eli. Hope you slept well. I slept better than I expected, he admitted. Guess the fresh air helps. And maybe the company, she added lightly. Eli smiled shyly but didn't answer. He wasn't sure how to respond, but the idea warmed his heart. They packed their things, tightened the saddle straps, and prepared for the next part of their journey. Mara pointed to the plain ahead, where the shapes of old buildings rested quietly under the early sunlight. Today we check those, she said. Might take a while. But somewhere out there could be the place you're looking for. Eli nodded slowly. I hope so. But I'm nervous too. That's normal, she replied. Sometimes answers are harder to face than questions. Her words confused him a little, but he didn't ask what she meant. Instead, he climbed onto Dusty, and together, they moved toward the plain. The ride was quiet at first. The land spread wide and open, a mix of soft grass and gentle hills. They reached the first old building, a small farmhouse with broken windows and a roof that had collapsed. Eli stared at it for a long time. Mara asked, Look familiar? He shook his head. No. I remember a big oak tree near our fence. I don't see any trees here. Then we keep searching, she said. They moved to the next location. This one had a barn still standing, though time had worn it down. Eli walked inside and ran his hand along the wooden boards. His mind tried to match the feeling with any memory, but nothing felt right. The walls were too plain, the smell too unfamiliar. It's not this one, he said softly. Mara watched him with understanding. We'll find it, Eli. Don't lose hope. They continued riding. The sun rose higher, warming the ground and making the air brighter. As they traveled, Mara shared small stories about her childhood adventures, and Eli listened gratefully. Her voice helped him stay calm, especially when his thoughts grew heavy. After some time, they reached a wide area with broken fences stretching across the land. Something about this place made Eli's heart tighten. He slowly dismounted his horse and walked forward, looking at everything carefully. Mara dismounted too. You remember something? She asked gently. I'm not sure, he said. But something about the fence feels familiar. He walked along the old fence line, his fingers brushing the rough wood. He stopped near a section where the fence dipped slightly. His breath caught. I remember, I think. He closed his eyes, letting the memory rise slowly. When I was little, I used to sit right here. I'd wait for my father to finish his work, and behind the fence, there was a big oak tree. He opened his eyes and looked around. Nothing was left of the tree now. only a large stump hidden by grass. But the shape of the stump, the way it leaned slightly to one side, it matched the old image in his memory. "This is it," Eli whispered. Mara walked closer, watching him carefully. "You're sure?" "I think so," he said, his voice soft and full of emotion. This feels like home." They explored the area quietly. The barn nearby was worn out, half folded in on itself. But its structure seemed familiar to Eli. He could almost imagine it the way it used to be, strong, full of warm light, with tools hanging on the walls. He remembered running around the barn, playing with a wooden stick, pretending it was a horse. He stepped inside. The light filtered through the broken roof in soft streams. Dust floated gently in the air. Eli took slow breaths, letting the memories settle gently inside him. "This place, it's not much left," he said. "But I remember the feeling. The smell, the way the floor creaked." Mara stood beside him. "Sometimes a feeling is stronger than anything else." They searched the old house next. Most of the walls were fallen or leaning, but a few rooms still held their shape. Eli stepped inside carefully, touching the wooden beams. He felt something calm, something sad, something comforting all at once. But then, while exploring a corner of the house, he noticed a small wooden box, partially buried under broken boards. It was dusty and old, but still strong enough to hold its shape. "What's this?" Eli asked. Mara knelt beside him. "Looks like a storage box. Maybe something got left behind." Eli gently lifted it. The lid was stuck at first, but after a soft push, it opened. Inside were a few folded letters, yellowed with age, and a small hand-drawn map. Eli's hands trembled. "These are my family's." Mara placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Take your time." He unfolded one of the letters. The handwriting was messy but warm, filled with small notes between his parents, simple things about their plans, their hopes, their days working on the ranch. Eli read silently, his eyes softening with every sentence. Another letter was addressed to him, though he had been too young to read it back then. It wasn't long, just a message telling him how loved he was, and how they hoped he'd grow up strong and kind. Eli held the letter close. "I didn't know they wrote this." Mara watched him quietly, giving him space. He then opened the small map. It showed the ranch layout and, most surprising of all, a marked route leading to a hidden part of the property where his family once kept a small cattle trail. Eli had never known about it. This shows more than my old map ever did," he said. "This is real. It's proof that I still have something left of them." Mara smiled gently. "Seems like the past wasn't lost after all." Eli sighed deeply, not with sadness, but with relief. For the first time, the weight he had carried for years felt lighter. Not gone, but easier to hold. He walked outside and stood beneath the open sky. He looked at the land, the broken fences, the old barn, the stump where the oak tree once stood. Even though time had changed everything, the heart of the place still felt alive. "I was afraid to find this," he admitted. "Afraid it would hurt too much." Mara stepped beside him. "But you found the truth. And the truth isn't here to hurt you. It's here to guide you." Eli nodded, holding the wooden box close to his chest. "Thank you, Mara. I wouldn't have reached this place alone." She smiled at him, warm and steady. "You didn't need me to get here. You just needed someone to walk beside you." Eli looked at the land once more. "I think I know what I want to do now." "What's that?" Mara asked. "I want to bring this place back to life. Even if just a small part of it." Mara nodded softly. "Then that's exactly what you'll do." They stood together under the brightening sky, the land stretching quietly before them. The moment wasn't loud or dramatic. It was gentle, peaceful, and full of meaning. Eli had found the truth buried in the land. He had found the pieces of his past he thought were gone. And with Mara beside him, he felt ready to step into the next chapter of his life. Eli stood quietly at the edge of the old Turner ranch, feeling a kind of peace he had never felt before. The sun was rising slowly, painting the sky with warm, soft colors. The air smelled fresh, and the light breeze carried the sound of distant birds. It was a peaceful morning, and for the first time in many years, Eli was not rushing anywhere, not wandering from place to place, and not feeling lost inside himself. He simply stood there, taking in the view of the land that once belonged to his family. Mara walked up beside him, holding 2 cups of warm tea. She handed one to him and smiled. Even though the ranch was broken down and empty, she could somehow see the good in it. Eli admired that about her. She always noticed things he missed, things he was too distracted to see. But she never made him feel bad for it. Instead, she helped him understand himself better. "This place has a lot of story left in it," Mara said, gently brushing dust off a wooden fence post. Eli nodded. "I didn't think I'd ever come back here," he replied. "I thought the past was too heavy for me." "But you came," Mara reminded him. "And that means something." Eli looked around. He imagined what the ranch looked like when he was a small child. He remembered his father waking up early, feeding the horses, and calling him to help. He remembered his mother humming while preparing breakfast. Those memories were soft and warm, but they also made him feel sad because he had lost them so young. For years he had run from the pain, thinking that if he kept moving, he wouldn't have to face it. But traveling without direction only made him feel more lost. Now, after days of traveling with Mara, after facing the truth of his past, after seeing the broken but still meaningful remains of the ranch, something inside him had changed. He wasn't drifting anymore. He took a slow sip of tea. "Do you think I can make something out of this place again?" he asked softly. Frome. I think you can make anything you choose," Mara replied. "You just needed to stop running." Ara. Her words felt steady, like the ground beneath his boots. Eli always struggled to stay focused. Always drifted into thoughts that made him miss important things around him. But Mara had helped him understand that his mind wandered because he carried too much inside. Now that he had finally faced this part of his past, he felt lighter, able to focus better, able to see the world with clearer eyes. They spent the next few days walking around the land, checking what could be saved. Some fences were still standing, though weak. The barn had broken walls, but the shape remained. A few tools were still usable, and in the small chest they found earlier, the map had shown the route of his family's last cattle trail. That map felt like a gift from the past, something to guide him into the future. Eli decided he wanted to rebuild just a part of the ranch, something small but strong. He didn't need a huge ranch like before. He just needed a place that felt like home. Mara agreed to help him, and together they made simple plans. Each morning they woke up early, cooked a light breakfast, and began working. Eli repaired the fence posts, while Mara cleared away dry bushes. Sometimes Eli would pause and drift into his thoughts, but Mara would gently remind him by asking simple questions or telling him a funny story. Her presence kept him steady, and slowly, Eli learned to keep his mind in the present moment. One afternoon, while repairing a broken gate, Eli stepped back and looked at his work. It wasn't perfect, but it was sturdy and clean. Mara looked at it too, and clapped softly. "See?" she said. "You're not lost at all. You're just finding your rhythm." Eli smiled, a real warm smile that reached his eyes. "I guess I am." As days passed, the ranch began to show signs of life again. The land didn't look abandoned anymore. It felt like someone cared about it. Eli planted a few seeds near the small house. Mara found a stray horse wandering near the hills and brought it to the ranch. The animal seemed gentle and calm, and Eli welcomed it as his first step toward building something new. During evenings, after the work was done, they sat together on the porch, watching the sky change colors. Mara joked that Eli still got distracted sometimes, like when he stared too long at the clouds or forgot where he put his tools. But she also told him she admired his deep thinking, his gentle nature, and the way he noticed small things others ignored, like wildflowers growing near the fence or the sound of water running under the rocks. Eli realized something important. His distractions were not his weakness. They were a part of who he was. The problem was not his wandering mind. It was the heavy memories he had been trying to avoid. Now that he had faced them, he could guide himself better. One evening, as they watched the stars, Eli looked at Mara with gratitude. "You helped me more than you know," he said. Mara shook her head. "You did the real work. I just asked a question." Eli laughed softly. "A question that changed everything." "Sometimes the right question does that," she replied. As weeks passed, the town of Redstone began to notice Eli's return. At first, people didn't know what to think. Many remembered him as the young cowboy who seemed lost, always drifting through town without direction. But now, word spread that he was rebuilding his family ranch. Curious townsfolk began to visit, offering help or bringing small gifts. Some brought tools, some brought food, and some just wanted to say hello. Eli welcomed them with a calm smile. For the first time, he felt like he belonged somewhere. He wasn't the distracted cowboy people wondered about. He was someone rebuilding a life with purpose. One day, the sheriff came by to see the progress. He looked around, impressed. "Never thought I'd see this place alive again," he said. "Neither did I," Eli replied honestly. "But you did it," the sheriff said. "You found your path." Eli nodded, feeling proud. In time, Eli fixed most of what he wanted. The ranch wasn't big or fancy, but it was peaceful, strong, and full of hope. Mara told him she would stay as long as he wanted her there, and he couldn't imagine the place without her. Together, they cared for the land, the animals, and the calm days that passed slowly and gently. Eli often walked to the edge of the ranch in the mornings, just to breathe in the fresh air. Each time, he felt grateful. He was no longer wandering with confusion. He had a place to stand, a purpose to follow, and a friend who believed in him. He also knew that any time he felt himself drifting again, he could bring his focus back by remembering how far he had come. The past didn't scare him anymore. The future didn't confuse him. He had found his balance, and whenever Mara teased him with the words, "Cowboy, are you always so distracted?" Eli smiled and answered, "Not anymore," because now he wasn't lost in the Wild West. He had found his path, his peace, and finally himself.